It's going to get really tricky for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting civil unrest. I mean, we're seeing bubbling of it anyway now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you just have to look at other countries around the world. It's foreshadowing what we're going to see here and in the UK where I'm from. I've got no doubt the increase in violence we're seeing is a result of tensions people are feeling. Yeah, it's kind of scary times, but the thing in my head, Steve, is like, well, where's the actual reset? Because at some point there has to be some kind of reset, and I don't mean some WEF Great Reset bullshit. I mean, the Weimar Republic eventually reset.
That's right.
And Germany had a stable economy. At some point, this shit has to reset. They can't just print tight. Like something's going to break, and then you get an actual reset. I've got no understanding how a reset happens. I think currency tends to last for about 90 years. Is it essentially just a complete debt jubilee, a reset, and a new currency, $2 comes along? Like, how does?
Well, think about it. Germany's had 4 currencies in the last 100 years.
Okay.
Right. So and we'll say the euro is one of them.
Okay.
Right. They achieved in the euro what they failed to achieve in 2 world wars. Control of the European economy. You guys got out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
I don't know.
I think. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've seen our debts over something like 2.5 trillion now. One of the interesting things, though, is despite the US government's printing so much money, the pound has been dropping against the dollar. Can you have a look, see what it is, Danny?
Yeah.
But it has been dropping.
Yeah. Well, a lot of currencies have been dropping against the dollar just recently, and it mostly has to do with Fed action. But you also ask the question about, what happens to the dollar, right? And if the dollar continues to inflate the way that it does, if you look at China, okay, the way that China pegs its currency to the dollar is by holding U.S. treasuries on its balance sheet.
Yep.
Over the last few years, the U.S. had been increasing its holdings of treasuries on its balance sheet, but China has not. China's held flat. So that means that they have essentially what that shows me is that they have a much more of a stable currency, and they're trying to become the next reserve currency. They're opening up trade routes with several countries that are commodity producing countries. They're forcing those countries to trade in renminbi instead of dollars, and it's a really slow game for them. But if the U.S. continues to print money at the scale that we're printing, cause inflation, by the way, for other people. And by the way, any country that utilizes dollars, this is the El Salvador example, right? When the U.S. government prints more money, it causes inflation on the dollar. Countries like El Salvador that use the dollar just got taxed.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is why they've gone to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I do wonder if they're going to launch their own currency again, though, a sovereign currency. I get the feeling if the US goes to much higher inflation, it's going to become a real problem for El Salvador. And I could imagine a scenario where they do launch their own sovereign currency.
I agree.
Just Bitcoin isn't enough, and they can't continue to get fucked by US policy.
I agree with that. Yeah, they're going to have to.
Yeah, there's something is it like 14 countries are dollarized?
Yeah, at least. I mean, there's some that are unofficially dollarized.
Yeah.
Right. Like Cuba. Cuba runs in dollars. They don't utilize their own currency at all.
Yeah, or other people, they have a mixture. Cambodia, most people want dollars.
Yeah, that's right.
Venezuela, most people want dollars. Yeah, I kind of don't want to get too depressive about this, but I kind of feel like over the next decade, this could be super serious, like global catastrophe.
Well, it'll definitely be a shift in power, a shift in economic power over the next decade. China's waiting in the wings. They're waiting for the U.S. to fail, and as soon as they do, they'll step in.
I mean, I'm not going to do it for ideological reasons, but do you think the renminbi is a store of value?
I hate to say it, but it probably is. I won't do it either.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You might not be able to answer this, but hey, say you were both the president and the Fed chair. What would you do?
Well, as president, I would stop spending money, because the more government spending is one of the biggest contributors to inflation right now. And every time we pass a new, quote unquote, stimulus bill, or all of these, this rhetoric around, well, we're going to spend our way out of inflation. I mean, people actually believe this, by the way, that, oh, okay, well, I guess you'll just spend more money and send more stimulus checks and that'll help us with inflation. I'm like, no, that causes more inflation, guys. And it doesn't help in the way that you think it does. But really, you have to cut spending. You have to get rid of all these excess programs that we have, that just don't make any sense. We really have to crack down on the budget. And the less we spend, the less inflation there'll be. That's number one.
The impact on that would be that temporary loss of that liquidity going into whatever projects, unemployment rising because people within government losing their jobs, the end of a large part of the rent seeking, but these people then have to go out into the economy and become productive.
Yeah, that's right.
And the economy will likely go into a recession, but have the opportunity to come out of it and avoid hyperinflation, which is probably a better scenario, but it isn't usually palatable for people who are vote seeking.
Yeah. Well, think about this. I mean, productive people. That's. I mean, have you ever met a U.S. congressperson or senator, and have you seen how many staff they have? I mean, is that really a good use of money? And
what was that number we saw the other day or came out? But the percent of the U.S. economy, which is
it was about 40%.
40% of the GDP was government spending.
Yeah, that's right.
That sounds like everything I learned about what happened under Chavez in Venezuela was a massive amount of income coming in because oil prices $120. I think 1 in 3 people in Venezuela, I think, were employed by the state. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But when the price of oil dropped to $60, they couldn't pay the people, and that's where it led to the hyperinflation situation there. You just think, oh yeah, well, these countries are kind of a little bit corrupt. And then you think something like the US or the UK or Europe, you think, wow, they've got smart people in there. They know this. They don't want to go into a hyperinflation scenario.
The US is not corrupt at all. Not one bit. I don't know about the UK.
Well, I think of it as a different kind of corruption. I think, God, I might sound completely almost racist in this scenario, but I think smaller states tend to have more kind of dictator corruption, whereby they tend to hold power, where I think places like the UK, Europe and US tends to be more like subtle corruption within the confines of democracy.
Right. Well, look, we're not murdering journalists for speaking out against the government, right?
Exactly.
I guess that's the definition of corruption.
You can't get their hands on Assange, that's why.
Ooh, Danny coming in hot. They might get him soon if Preeti Patel.
Well, the journalists here commit suicide.
They do. They do.
Yeah, they don't get murdered.
Yeah, they do it in Russia as well. They shoot themselves in the back of the head.
Yeah.
But God, you just think, what if you knew a hyperinflation is like, the best thing is to accept the natural cycle, accept that you might lose the election, but do the right thing to avoid hyperinflation. I don't know but therefore I don't know if is there some kind of national security issue, and it's a game of chicken between countries. You break first.
Well, here's what happens, right? Because there is a game of chicken that's always being played, right? And it's called exports.
Right.
Okay. So if the U.S. is producing washing machines, and China and Korea are producing washing machines, and the U.S. prints so much money that things cost more here, then there's a balance that's offset in exports, right? The stronger a currency, the more their exports cost other people to buy. The weaker a currency, the less, right? So if we go too far, then our exports begin to cost less because our currency becomes weak against those other currencies. If that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So you've got there's a balance that's always being played, and so that's why China keeps having to step it up, because their whole business is exports.
Yeah,
their whole economy is exports.
But is there any sense in bringing back manufacturing to the US? Is that a viable scenario? Let the currency weaken?
Well, I mean, there has been really for the last 10 years, 12 years, a real push to bring manufacturing back to the US.
Okay.
And it's happened mostly regionally, but also at the federal level. There's been a real push there, right? Whether it's the Obama administration, the Biden administration, even the Trump administration, have been really pushing to bring back manufacturing.
Okay, and look, if you were the president, you would stop spending. Actually, on that point as well, I just saw this fascinating thing in the UK. Obviously, they're trying to cut spending as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they said they were going to do is, we got the number, didn't we? It was 90,000 employees. Mm-hmm. They wanted to let 90,000 government employees go, and I think that was about, I can't remember what percentage that was, but that was the increase in the number of employees in government in the last 4 years. So despite the fact it's been difficult economic times, COVID, the government has continued in the UK to increase the size of its staff.
Right.
Which seems completely fucking stupid. It goes back to the point that every government really does need to have a budget. We have a budget. This show has a budget. If the show goes over budget, I can't pay my staff, they quit. Therefore, the show dies. Mm-hmm. In the UK, I have it's so simple, Steve. I have a budget. There's my mortgage, there's my shopping, there's my holiday, and there's some stuff for the kids. If I go over that budget, I can't pay something like my mortgage, I lose my house. Mm-hmm. The government does not have it has a budget, it goes over budget, and it just takes money off us.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, it's so fucking simple. Why don't people fucking realize? Why do we put up with this?
Well, it's because of the short-term nature of politics, right? I mean, it's long-term, but it's short-term too. And most people point to, at the federal level, the president, at the state level, the governors, and they have limited terms. So they want to do the best they can within their limited time. For the president, it's 8 years. So anything that you can push off to the next guy, every single guy will do, right? So you want to graduate with the best possible economy possible, and then let the next guy suffer. Happens at state government as well, right? State governments will always issue a ton of bonds to pay for a lot of infrastructure and a lot of cool things and bring more jobs, and then they leave it to the next person to manage. And then what does that person do? Well, they're forced to now take up the slack and do the same thing, and they just create this, bigger and bigger debt gap. And very few states actually have a balanced budget.